fans, and welcome to Week 11 Power Rankings. I am joined with Hutch. What's up?
What's up?
So, why don't we just get right to it? At 14, once again, we do have Cam, coach of Washington Wailords. He played rather well this week, honestly. He made the plays he needed to make to deal with what he assumed his opponent's sets were. Unfortunately, he did mispredict with the Keldeo, which is a big threat versus Marin. But honestly, I'd say that was a fair call, even though it didn't work out for him. It's definitely one of his better played games overall. But still lost in the end. Terrible record still. It's a shame.
Yeah, 3-0 to a playoff team. It's not bad, but yeah, you got to find a way to pick up wins, and it's indisputably the worst record. I mean, it's only one loss behind the PC Barcelona and the Inter Melodic, but still, most of Cam's matches have been pretty convincing. So it just sucks to see Cam, who's not a terrible battler. His team is just not good, flat out. Cam, I'm expecting a better draft next season.
Sure. At number 13, we both have PC Barcelona. Why don't you talk about that?
All right, so I have Shadow down here. I had Shadow at 12. Basically, it just comes down to the fact that although Shadow lost 1-0, he was kind of just relying on slacking the whole game, which wasn't really a reliable strategy. Whereas Static really had chances to win the game. He just made some relatively questionable plays, but I'll talk about him later. But Shadow, it's just he has less wins in the ASL than Static does this season. At least he has one win, whereas Static has two. So it really just comes down to that. I'm kind of just swapping it up between 12 and 13.
Yeah, even though he did technically have better differential this week for the game, it's like the entire game we knew he was going to lose, and he kept on doing the strategy that everyone knew was going to lose. There was no way that he could have won with the slacking the way that he played it, even though it was getting a kill every single time, because he didn't have the sack advantage. We did see how the saner sets did help him out in getting the game to be closer, at least. Like, you didn't really see anything particularly crazy from him, and as a result, we got a closer game technically, which I think is good to see. But it should have been clear to him that he wasn't going to be able to win with what he was doing, and he should have changed it up. But at the same time, he was already out of playoffs, so I can understand why he might have just wanted to have fun. Static lost 3-0, which is a bit worse, but I still put him at number 12 above him, because I feel like he just played better than Shadow. He had a much clearer game plan based on the information that he had, and honestly, in the end, Alola and Marowak could have won if the Hitmonchan didn't have Sucker Punch. Not a good thing to base your strategy off of, but it's like at least a bit more concrete than what Shadow had. And there weren't any like massive misplays that I felt, and he had solid prep. So what do you think?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. He actually had a strategy going through it. Like I get how slacking is getting a kill every time, but like you said, he doesn't have the sack advantage, and slacking you really need a sack advantage to be able to win. So Static just had a better path to victory, and I believe he had Tricker and Flame Charge, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little
Yeah, that
interesting
was weird.
stuff. He made a couple interesting plays, which I don't really agree with, but although it was worse, he had a plan to get to victory, and like you said, if Hitmonlee doesn't have Sucker Punch, he has a very real possibility of winning that game.
Yeah, so at number 11, we both have Malone. Why don't you talk about that?
Alright, so Malone this week lost 3-0 to TJ, which essentially eliminates all chances of him in the playoffs. I believe at this point he is eliminated from the playoffs. I can check. Actually, he's not. So it's just astronomical how hard it's going to be for him to get into the playoffs, where everyone else above has somewhat realistic shots to get into the playoffs. So Malone didn't play terrible, but to be fair, when your back's up against the wall, you have to pull out wins for the rest of the season. He just didn't get it done this week.
Yeah, it feels like he's taken steps backwards from how well he's been playing the past 3 weeks. He was actually on a 3-game winning streak until he fought TJ. He started to let Pokemon take unnecessary damage again, something he particularly does often when trying to revenge kill Pokemon. You saw it when he went into Electros to sack the Mismagius, even though he had two Pokemon that could outspeed and kill it, which is something I didn't understand because Electros was still very good in that matchup. He also set up in situations he really couldn't afford to do it, and honestly, it looks like he could have won the game based on the matchup, but he just made a fair few questionable plays, I feel. I really hope he watches this replay and understands where he went wrong, because he's been playing far better in the earlier games, and I can see him learning from this and improving going forward.
Yeah, he's made a huge improvement from last season.
Anyway, at number 10, we both have Ian. Week against you, ending his rather significant win streak and really hurting his playoff chances. He made a few misplays, but the main reason why he seemed to lose was because he didn't have a solid game plan. I don't feel he wasn't really prepared to deal with the Alolan Doug trio, and his game plan, I guess, was winning with Clefable, but in the end, he sacked it off to sleep. I guess the matchup was pretty difficult for him, but I think it just came down to Hutch being the better player in that game.
Yeah, that game really hurt him as a 5-0. I can understand. I would put him a lot higher if it was only like a 2-0. But taking a 5-0 like when he needed to really win out is very hurtful. And he just did not have concrete prep for a Alolan trio, which I proved can be an actual threat now. And his game plan was winning with Clefable, which isn't the greatest strategy, especially when I can run a lot of different things to break through Clefable, like I showed. And just he didn't realize that the Alolan trio was Scarf, which allowed his Weavile to get O-Code, which was definitely a big factor because Weavile had a chance to bring it back. And it's just he did not play at the performance that we've seen Ian over the past couple of weeks.
Sorry, you've been cutting out. Are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright, yeah, sorry. Internet issues. 9, we both have Keister, the other 5-6 team. It's a very close game this week, actually, versus Brad, and it's probably the best I've seen him play all season. But unfortunately, he did lose, which brings him to the aforementioned 5-6 record, which really hurts his playoff chances as well. Honestly, Thunder Wave is a really good move, and Brad showed why. It's definitely sucked for Keister that had to go like that. I think he had a very solid chance of winning had Thunder Wave been less amazing of a move. But we'll see how it goes. He has a relatively easy remaining schedule, and he's got good differential based on his record, so he does have a shot at playoffs still, I'd say. But it's going to be tough. It's less in his control now.
Yeah, it was definitely exciting to see Keister finally play to the caliber that he was playing at last year. I remember a couple of weeks in this season we had him at like 2-1, if I'm not mistaken. So it's good to see him finally play well again. Unfortunately, he just wasn't able to pull out the W. Like you said, there was a fair amount of parahacks which prevented him from doing so. Not saying he would have won the game if those didn't occur, but it certainly didn't help him. And yeah, his differential is not bad, a +2 for a 5 and 6. That's very respectable, and if he gets a couple big wins, he can really bring this around. And he is, I believe, he is like the easiest remaining schedule. He plays Cam and he plays Shadow, so I can definitely see him making a nice little playoff berth as the number 6 team. As long as he plays like he did against Anderson, against his next 2 games, I can see him pulling out very big wins.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not fully in his control as he is relying on some of the above teams to lose. The next 4 above teams have a 6-5 record as opposed to a 5-6 record, which is definitely beneficial. At 8, we have our first difference, actually. Why don't you talk about why you put TJ here?
Alright, so I put DJ down here purely because of differential. These next couple of weeks are going to be very deciding, And to come into it with the lowest differential out of all of them, it's going to hurt a lot because you have to hope that you can pull out some big wins. You have to hope that you can pull out, or your opposing people that are at the same record as you get some big losses. But a 3-0 win over Malone, it always feels good to get a 3-0. 3-0 is a nice solid win. DJ does not have the easiest schedule coming up, though. He does play Ian, and he is going to have to play Susie. So two very big games. But if he can pull out those two, he is definitely a very big contender for the playoffs. It's just the problem is if some other people that are also 6-5 end up getting 2 wins, it's going to very much hurt him due to his differential.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I put Cody here. Even though I think Cody has the best chance of making playoffs out of the 6-5 teams, he's only actually gotten 2 wins so far in the ASL because he's a new coach, and his 2 wins are against the lowest coaches in the standings, so I don't know how well you can really say he's proven himself. He played really well in his first game, but this game, less so. He was definitely in control the entire game, but I feel like he could have pulled out a lot more to get better differential rather than indulging Shadow in his bloodbath of the game. Like, he could have gone for a Mac punch on the slacking rather than switching out to sack something every time and then try to get something done with Absol or something. I don't know, but I think he could have gotten better than a 1-0 victory there if he really put his mind to it, but instead he just went with the flow, I guess, and that doesn't show him as a super good player. Anyway, at number 7, we're back to agreement, and we've both put Marin Varane here. Similar reason to Cody, honestly. He hasn't been here as long as all the other coaches, so he hasn't really proven himself as much. He's currently 2-2, so that's like technically worse than Cody at 2-0, but unlike Cody, he was able to pick up a really impressive win against Brad and is now showing himself to be more consistent. He also played really well against Cam, even though it's one of the lower teams. He was facing Cam at what I would say is his peak performance, and he made some very good reads, had a clear understanding of what he needed to do to win. So I can definitely see him winning out now with, once again, a fairly easy schedule, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's relatively easy. Basically, he's kind of in the same spot as TJ. He plays Shadow week 12, and he's going to be playing Static week 13. So he has a really easy schedule, which is easier than TJ coming up. So it's going to make it easier for him. He's got a little bit better of a differential. It's just, like you said with Cody, he hasn't really proven himself. He's had some tough games. He did pull out a win against Brad, which is very impressive nonetheless. But it's just his differential isn't as high as he'd probably like it. His schedule is easy, so he's got to prove himself over the next 2 games. And if he wins 2 games, he's 100% a playoff contender. All right, you can go ahead and do the next one if that cut out. Hello?
Once again, I appear to be having internet connectivity problems. Were you finished there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I've got Slow Bohemians here. Yes, I have the lowest differential out of them, but and also probably do have the hardest schedule, but just based on this game, I think the other coaches have. He's fought the harder opponents and pulled out victories against people like Brad and stuff, which Marin also has done, but more recently. But real reason is I think that Malone is a more impressive opponent that he had to beat than Cam or Shadow was. And even though I don't think Malone was playing as well, I think TJ still played really well to sets with the sub nasty plot Mismagius, and it worked out for him, and he secured some pretty good differential out of it, which is going to be pretty important going forward. So we'll see. But
All right. So I have Susie at the number 6 spot, and another disagreement. So I have Susie here, and I basically just lined it up in differential because that's going to be the first tiebreaker. The tiebreakers are, of course, record. then you have differential, then you have head-to-head tiebreakers, and then you have win streaks. So you'll never get to the win streaks, but whatever. It's gonna help that Susie does have a decent differential. If I'm not mistaken, it's a +4, because I think Cody is a +6. Let me go ahead and check real quick. Yeah, it is a +4 for Susie. So it's gonna be very beneficial that he is higher up there. And Susie does have a difficult schedule to end out. He plays me next week, and then he's going to end the season against TJ. So definitely going to be a tough schedule. But the nice thing is if he does, if he is able to knock TJ out in the last game, he's going to be able to beat him out, and that's going to help him in the long run. And he did take a commanding victory over Static, and of course packing the sucker punch to be clutch and save the game was very good prep on his part.
Yeah, I put Susie a bit higher because obviously I didn't consider playoff implications quite as heavily into my rankings. I considered what's happened so far more so. And yeah, Susie's got good differential, and this week beat Static, playing once again, I think pretty much at his best this season. There were a lot of people who pulled out all the stops this week, and I think Static was one of them. But Susie was still able to keep a level head and, win out the game with some good prep on his part. So yeah, why don't you talk about why you put Cody at this?
Alright, so I put Cody at number 5, and like I said, differential's huge. Cody's sitting at a +6, and he played the game very vanilla against Shadow, like you said, just went with the flow, which is kind of annoying to see. But he did pull out the win, which definitely is going to help him moving forward. And he does play Static, and then he plays myself. So if he can get a win high enough over Static, there's a chance that he can actually just clinch next week, which is huge. And if he clinches next week, it's just more of a reason to put him at the 5. And you could technically say that he's undefeated in the ASL, I think. But
yeah, 2-0 though.
yeah, it's just he hasn't played against as good of opponents. Otherwise, I might have put him higher just because he is undefeated. But he's gonna have to prove himself in the final week.
Yeah, so we're now once again back into agreement with Hutch at 4th. He's the only one who's got a 7-4 record right now, which is very big for him. It means that he can afford to lose a game and still clinch playoffs. That's something that none of the teams below him have, especially considering he got a really big 5-0 win on Ian, which not only improves his differential, but knocks down one of his potential competitors in the game. He played the game really well overall. He brought some good prep, and while he did get a little bit of luck, he clearly understood not only what his path to victory was, but what Ian's path to victory was and how he could stop that. And that's another thing that I feel is a really advanced quality that not a lot of people have or utilize, is reading what your opponent wants to be doing to win their game.
Yeah, so the 5-0 victory over Ian was huge. It helps myself a lot. And I love talking about myself. So let's go ahead and talk about my prep. And I brought Jan on the Slow King, shut down the Clefable from winning the game. Brought a Scarf, a Lowland Doug Trio to clean up. Both of them worked. So I just think my prep was solid in the match. It helped me get a 5-0 victory, which really puts me at a huge gap from people 5 through 8, I believe it is, which is going to be very beneficial. So if I do drop a game against Susie or Cody, if I lose one of those games, it's not going to hurt me a whole ton. It's going to put my playoff chances up in the air, but there's a chance that I lose both games and still clinch, and it's a real possibility. So that's just why I'm up in 4th plus record.
I think that you're still technically in a running for the bye, right, too?
Yes, there's actually a chance if I get the bye. I have to 6-0 Susie. You have to 6-0 Anderson. Let's see here. Then Anderson has to 1-0 TCP as I also 6-0 Cody, and then I get the number 2 seed.
Okay, a little bit less realistic than I thought, but
it might be less than that, but that's a guarantee. It might be a little less than that, but that's a guarantee.
Yeah, that was extreme, to say the least. But yeah, I definitely thought it was a little bit more likely, which is why I brought it up. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have.
It might be
anyway,
5-0s and 4-0s. I don't know.
Anyway, at number 3, we're back to disagreeing again. but I'd say overall our list has been pretty consistent. I've got Brad, while you have TCP. I could easily switch these two around, but I chose to put Brad up here because he did win against Keystar, while TCP didn't win against myself. I will say that there was a fair bit of hacks involved to get Brad to win that game. Not to say that he would have lost otherwise, but it definitely was very close as it was with all the hacks. So I think Keystar probably would have been in a far more advantageous situation to win. It was also only a 1-0, which could definitely matter for bye implications because they've got, I believe, the same record right now at 8-3.
Yes.
So differential definitely matters for getting that bye, especially considering they still have to fight each other. Brad fights me week 12, while TCP fights Malone, so he's got a tougher path to getting that bye, but he still needs to focus on differential to get it for sure. And only a 1-0 victory isn't really helping his case for getting that bye, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I just put TCP down here, and it's hard to swap the two because same record. They're like 4 differential points apart. I basically just put TCP down here because he lost. It's hard to dock him for losing to you, which you're undefeated. But Anderson did pull out a win, which it was only against Keister, which hasn't had the greatest season as of late. But it was definitely a very close match, which both of them were close, to be fair. It's just Anderson won and TCP didn't, and I think the third spot should be green for this week, just because. Let's just give them all buys. You know what? Let's just give them all buys.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't work out super well. Yeah, so number 2, I put TCP. I don't want to knock him for losing to me because, I'm undefeated. Don't want to talk about it, but haven't lost yet. I will say that I think TCP definitely dropped the ball this game, but I can understand why. There's a very real chance that we fight in playoff finals, and he probably doesn't want to reveal too much about what he's thinking versus me, because he fights Malone and Brad next week, so he's got a very good chance of getting the bye regardless of this loss. So it definitely makes sense to me why he would have maybe not gone all out versus me, and I think he's got a very good matchup versus me and would probably want to have every single advantage that he can in playoffs.
Yeah, so I put Anderson here. I kind of explained it a lot, but yeah, I just saw Anderson getting the win, which was a lot better in my eyes. But to see him play you in TCP is gonna be ridiculous. His last 2 weeks are the hardest 2 final weeks of the season. So if Anderson can win both those games, I'll be honest, I don't see any reason why he doesn't go to the championship at that point. And he these last 2 games, he can pick 2 roads. He can choose to just settle at the 3 or 4 spot, whatever he lands up or ends up with. He can choose to settle with that and not reveal stuff because he's has a good shot at playing you guys in the playoffs, and at some point at least. Or he can just go for that number 2 spot. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Anderson does. But it's up in the air at this point. It's just he won and TCP lost. That's kind of my only reasoning for swapping the two.
That's definitely a fair reasoning, and I 100% understand that. Number 1, you've got me, as usual, undefeated, blah, blah, blah. I will say that I did not expect to win this game. Honestly, I think I should have probably lost to the Latios, but the Latios ended up not being max speed, which was really nice. And I also think that TCP made a few misplays, but, I did win, and I've clinched the first seed this week, I believe, right?
Yes, yes.
So I'm guaranteed to be first seed bye, which is great. No one else got the guaranteed bye yet.
Yeah, there's really no point in actually moving you at all. You're the number 1 seed guaranteed. So there's just no point in moving an undefeated team that's guaranteed a number 1 seed, guaranteed the bye, all that good stuff, and definitely beating TCP was very it was very impressive just to see you beat a really top tier team now. You're going to play Anderson next week. It's going to be a very important game, like I said with Anderson. It's really going to show how your playoff run is going to be looking. And yeah, just #1 seed. I have no reason to move you for the rest of the PR.
Yeah, especially considering technically none of my games matter for me at all anymore, except for the pride of having the best record possible.
Which you only need one more win to get.
Yes, and I also fight Cam.
Right.
The only way I'm moving myself down from the #1 spot at this point is if I do lose to Cam, because I'd just be so ashamed that I'd have to move myself down. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for us this week, unless you've got any closing notes.
Nope, go ahead.
So thank you guys for watching Week 11 Power Rankings. Goodbye.
All right, goodbye, guys.